Today I'm speaking with Maria Gernand. Maria, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Tim. How are you? Thank you so
Good.
much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I've been watching some of your videos several times, actually. Maria is a wedding photographer in the Chicago area, but she's been doing some YouTube videos as well about her deconversion process. And you're married. You have, is it one little
Mhm.
boy?
Yes, Rio is his name, and he's the most fabulous little 3-year-old.
Oh, that's awesome. And our kids are about the same age. And your husband is a musician, is that right?
He is a musician, yeah, but lately he hasn't been working so much on his music, and he's been focusing on our photography business because we both work that full time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
hmm
And you just moved just to the Chicago area, and you're actually in the city itself?
Yeah, I
That-
live like 20 minutes from downtown.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
you'll, when COVID hopefully and all that settles down, you'll be able to take advantage of a lot of cool stuff in the city
Yes.
more and more.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I still want to be able to go to all the restaurants,
I'm
but we still
sure.
get a little bit of that like joy of like food.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and hopefully stuff like some shows. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff there. Just for
hmm
the rest of the bio, you mentioned on your videos that you grew up in a evangelical church in Guatemala that was sort of
hmm
like a Baptist church, and that it had more of a Pentecostal or charismatic feel later on, and that you
hmm
felt drawn to be a missionary to those who had never heard the gospel.
hmm
And at that point, something changed, and we're going to go into that in a few minutes. But apart from the deconversion process, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself in general and who you are and what you like to do?
Yeah, like me right now.
Yep.
Well, that's a really good question. I usually feel like I don't like talking so much about who I am as just like showing who I am.
hmm
But I guess I'm someone who believes strongly in personal transformation. And I really, really like embrace that thought because I feel like it was something that I couldn't like believe before. It was like, oh, I am like this, and it's weird that like I would try to pretend to be someone else, but then it's like realizing I'm not pretending. I'm actually becoming someone new, someone different. And I work a lot in that. Like I try to like take different practices and learn from different places. So I focus a lot in that like personal development. And actually, this year I'm gonna start studying psychology.
Nice.
And yeah, so I want to go for a focus in really just trauma and like the whole like personal transformation after coming out of Christianity or any
Hmm.
religion in
That's
general.
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully speaking with Marlene Winnell soon. I'm sure you've heard of her name, and just I'm drawn very much to the same concepts. There's a lot of issues regarding this, just the psychology even of belief, not necessarily of trauma, but just what does it take to psychologically
Mm,
believe in,
yeah.
a God that you never see or hear from, and to believe in blood magic, to believe in miracles when you never have evidence for it. And it's an interesting study. But then to add on what you said, the whole trauma part of it, that's a whole
hmm
new ball game, and that's awesome. I certainly hope that goes well. I'd love to keep in touch with you over the months and years about how that's going and hear what you're
Yeah,
learning on that.
sure.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your background? I know you grew up in Guatemala, but what was that like, and what was your church like?
Well, yeah, like you said, I grew up in a church that it was pretty much like a Baptist church here in America.
Hmm,
And that was like, I went to church since I was born. So that was until I was probably 13. And then from then on, my church just like had a 180 degree, and it became like a Pentecostal church. So
hmm,
like, and all the like the spirit touching people and people falling and speaking in tongues and all of this. So it was like a big transformation for the church itself, which is I feel like very uncommon for a whole church to have that big flip.
yeah.
And I was the daughter of one of the pastors of the church, so of course we had to
Oh wow.
be, or like we were all in.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of responsibility on me too. I feel like, no, I'm pretty sure there was a lot of responsibility because I was often being reminded of like, you're the pastor's daughter, like people are looking at you. We have, technically they wouldn't put it in these exact words, that we'd always say like we have to bear witness or like be a good testimony for others, but it was basically saying like we have a reputation to keep.
Hmm,
And so it was like I couldn't um like do certain things or like allow myself to think certain things because it was like, no, I'm like the pastor's daughter. I have to be the example and everything.
hmm. And your mom, I assume, was a believer as well?
Yes, and she was considered a pastor too.
Okay.
So she was a woman pastor. My church, in that sense, they were very open to women being able to be in leadership. Except
Okay.
that, of course, they would never teach the man. Of course, that would be too much.
And with the just stepping back a little bit before then, you grew up obviously exposed from your parents at a young age, exposed to the Bible and the gospel. Did you have a particular memory of when you placed your faith in Jesus as a young girl?
Yes. So I think I was always like, I always understood everything because it was like so often like taught to me the whole like gospel. So it was
Mm,
always very clear to me, and I was always convinced that I was a Christian. But it wasn't until a summer Bible school that they asked the question like who wanted to give their lives to Christ. And I was like, I want to do it. I want to do this prayer thing. And I want the pastor to be proud of me and feel like I'm being relieved of my sins. And I was probably 7 at that time.
mhm.
And I remember them praying for me. And I think I might have been like kind of like acting that part because I was like crying and I was like, I remember like saying like, I feel this weight being lifted off me. And it's like, what weight could I have like had when I was 7, like of sin? Like what weight could there had been? But I felt like that was how conversion happened.
Yeah.
But then of course I did understood the whole like meaning of being a Christian.
Mm. What did it mean to you from that point, and as you grew into it over the next few years? What was it like? What would it, if someone else was not a Christian and you talked to them, and they said, "What does that mean that you're a
Yeah.
Christian?" What did it mean to you?
Yeah. To me, being a Christian was that, well, you believe in Jesus Christ as God, being one with the Holy Spirit and God, and that he resurrected 3 days after he take the burden of our sins when he was on the cross. And then through us accepting the gift of him forgiving our sins with that sacrifice, then taking that gift was like accepting becoming a Christian and him carrying our burden.
Hmm. Did you feel like as you placed your faith in Jesus, as you made that, your real, not just your family's belief, but your belief, and it sounds like you grew into it more and more as you were talking about being drawn into missionary work. Obviously, you're making
Mm-hmm.
it very personal for you. Did you
Mm-hmm.
feel a sense of realness? Like, when you prayed, did you feel like you were actually talking to God?
Oh yeah, I
Okay.
I was all in. Like Jesus was the love of my life. He was everything to me.
Hmm.
It's it was very hard for me to go through the whole deconversion process because to me it was leaving the love of my life and my father and like the closest person, the closest being to me, it was Jesus. Like I was the kind of kid that since I was little, I would already be very aware and conscious of salvation and the need that other people had for salvation. And I would be preaching to my friends. I would be having debates at the age of like 10 trying
Hmm.
to like help my friends figure out like how to get to heaven and how to like know Christ and how to have a personal relationship. I was so intense about that. Even with my Christian friends, I would be like, yes, but this is not enough. Like we have to have a personal relationship and like we
Hmm.
have to be intimate with him. I would have devotions almost every day and I would feel so guilty when I wouldn't have my like time of devotion. I would be like so burdened. Like the longest I could go was a week and that I would already feel like I am a terrible Christian. Like I haven't had like intimacy with God and like I need to go back to that place. So
Hmm.
it was a really close personal relationship.
Did you feel like you had peace from God, like not just in general, but did you have peace in general from God? But did you have peace about certain things, like where you would maybe pray, should I
Mm.
go to this thing or that thing? Should I, date this
Mm.
guy or that guy? Should I buy this car, that car? Like, did you pray about things and feel like God was leading you to have peace about certain decisions?
Yeah, I would pray about almost every single decision. And sometimes I would pray about even the most silly decisions because I was like, why not? Like, God should be on everything in our lives.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if it was like real peace that I had or if it was more of like just wanting that reassurance and like kind of like, okay, I already prayed. And my way to see things was like, if I prayed, if God knows that my heart truly wants to do what he wants, then he wouldn't put me in a bad situation. Like if he knew that I really want to follow him, if he knows that I really want to do his will, then he won't let me do the wrong thing, you know?
Right.
So I would always trust that. And then after I pray, if he wouldn't show or reveal anything that told me not to or to do it, then I would just go for it. You know, I was like, okay.
And going forward a little bit to a more current years, when you got married, were you already out of Christianity, or did you marry as a Christian to a Christian?
I married as a Christian to a Christian, and that has been a topic that we've been talking about because it definitely like shook our idea of our marriage when we both deconverted. Thankfully, my husband also deconverted almost at the same time. His story, like we've talked about before, like he might be able to share it later. It's a little different, well, definitely different to mine, but thankfully we both deconverted at the same time. But we've been still like to today, like we're still talking about how that looks like for us now, like what this looks like now.
Yeah, it's a whole new world. And I mean, I think it's awesome that you both did deconvert about the same time, because it is hard. I'm in a situation where it's not that, you know, my wife did not deconvert. She's very much a strong believer. And it's a different dynamic when you, you know, when you have to kind of deal with two different worldviews. But I think you've alluded to in your videos, you know, people can bring graciousness and kindness and respect to those discussions, which is very important.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask to take a few steps back and go back to when you were a Christian. Did you, like, when did the cracks appear? Did you feel like there was issues that you saw? And I know, like, no one can say, like, here's like the, you know, I was a Christian and a firm Christian up to this day, and then I deconverted in a day. You might have a day like myself where you would kind of admit you deconverted, but you know, there was always a lot of things, you know, seeds that were planted for maybe years in advance. But if you can remember, like, what was the earliest thing you remember that just is like, that doesn't sound right? Was that when you were young? Was that not till you were an adult?
Well, I think I've always been very inquisitive, you say? Yeah, I've been very inquisitive since I was little. And I don't know if you've heard of multiple intelligences, but I know that, so there's 9 different kinds of intelligences that we all like are prone to lean towards like one or another, you know? And one of my stronger ones is the existential intelligence, which is all of all of those questions of like, why are we here? What are we doing? You know? And so I remember now looking back, like sometimes I would ask questions to my teachers or my parents about like, why this or something, or like, how is this possible? Or like questions that like maybe are silly, but are actually, if you think about it, they can be really good questions that there should be an answer to. I would be like, hey, can Satan be like forgiven? Like, what if he regrets what he did? You know? And my parents would be like, oh, he would never. Like, he just won. And I would be like, but why? You know, like you still wonder, like, okay. Like, would God be gracious enough to forgive Satan? Like, I don't know.
So you were asking those questions like as a young child or a teenager?
Yes, when I was little. But then I was like, well, I guess those are silly questions and I can just trust God. And then growing up, I think I stopped kind of like asking those questions to myself, and I focused mostly on, this is what I know. That's all I need to know. And this is what I'm going to share. You know, I'm not pretty sure if those were simply my ideas, or I mean, we were taught that, you know, like all you need to know is this and we need to share it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it boils down to the gospel. Like, as long as, no matter what the questions are, as long as we know that Jesus is God, his blood covers us, he died and rose again. That's the core. And that's kind of, as long as that's true, we're good.
Yes. And I always counted myself very lucky for being able to have that faith. I was always like, well, I mean, the Bible says that like it's the Holy Spirit who gives the faith to the people. And I'm like, I am so lucky that he gave me that ability. Because I was like, not everyone gets it. And they just come to earth and they never get to experience that. And so I was like, I'm just taking this as a gift and that's it. But it wasn't until I started my training to be a missionary, which is a whole deal, because the organization that I was working with ended up being more of a cult than
Mm.
an actual organization. But thankfully I was able to kind of like notice like the red flags and get out of it kind of like on time, if someone could say that.
Their focus
um
was going to be to people that had never heard the gospel before. Is that correct?
yes, it was reaching out to like the least reached nations. That was the organization's focus, was sending missionaries only to the least reached nations.
So if you had stayed with them, what kind of
Mhm.
location do you think you might have considered going to?
Jordan was the
Okay.
place where I felt like God was calling me to. Mostly the whole like Arab world, but I lived in Jordan for 3 months, and so I feel like that's my place.
Hmm. My journey was very similar, and
Hmm.
I went to 1 year of a school called New Tribes Mission Institute. The group New Tribes is now called Ethnos 360. They changed their name to
I
South
heard of
Africa.
New Tribes, yeah.
Yeah, their focus is very similar. They're more focused on tribes, like tribes in the middle of the jungle, or
Hmm.
somewhere where there's. It's not just that they've not heard of Jesus; it's that a lot of them don't even have an alphabet yet. They talk to
Hmm.
each other, but they don't have any books at all.
Like people in the Amazons and stuff.
Amazons and a lot of New Guinea, a
New
lot in
Guinea, yeah.
Indonesia, and just
Hmm.
people where they live in the jungle and they don't know a lot about the world or about anything, and apart from their life in the tribe, and they don't have an
Hmm.
alphabet in many cases, and so the goal would be to go in and learn the language, learn the culture, really be a part of them for a couple of years until you really could help them develop an alphabet, and do
Hmm.
that, work with them to develop it in a way that made sense, develop
Hmm.
linguistics tools so they could actually read their own writing now. And then, of course, your ultimate priority is to take that all up to the point where you can translate the Bible and then
Hmm.
begin to preach it. So I definitely understand some of where you're coming
Hmm.
from. Did you, apart from the cult part of it, did you feel like that was, and this is my projecting my experience, but did you just feel like that was the best life possible?
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. I was like, why aren't we all doing this? And I would be invited to churches to preach. And I remember
Mm,
like when I would be preaching, I would just trying to get them to understand the message. And I was like, sometimes after the whole service, then I would be talking with some friends and they would just talk about their lives. And I would be like, you didn't hear anything? Like, didn't you hear that there's people dying without Christ? Like, drop everything, like go
yeah.
to the nations. So to me it was like the only logical step to take as a Christian.
Hmm. Yeah, makes sense. And you mentioned that you felt at this point that they were like a cult. I don't want to get off track too much, but I'm just curious. Do you remember
Yeah.
anything that stood out to you about them that, and without making anybody in that group feel bad, but just in a generic sense, like what kind of things stood out to you? Is that's a little bit not just Christianity, which has its own whole set of problems that we're about to dive into, but like there's kind of like a subset of Christianity, different Christianities that we have today that they're a lot worse. Like, what was it that stood out to you about that group that made them in a even worse category to you?
Well, the leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna say that, but yeah, the leader.
Is that in the sense like that they're not questionable? Like you can't, they're right
Hmm.
no matter what they say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he would have a lot, like he would have a say on almost everything we would do.
Hmm.
So even the people we would be dating and when we would date people. So yeah.
Yeah. So micromanaging your spirituality, that's crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, my husband was a very strong man to be able to defeat that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So going back to the whole idea of cracks in the
Hmm.
metaphorical dam. The
Yeah.
water of deconversion is pushing hard, but the
Hmm.
dam that holds it back is very strong Christianity. The water of reality is pushing, so to speak. The dam of Christianity is holding it back, but cracks start to appear. When did that like really start to become an issue, and what was that
Hmm.
about? Like, what did you start to say? I need to think about this. I need to ask about this. I need to study this. Like, what was that? When did it kind of start to get serious?
I think no, I know like my first like My first like crisis, I would say, because I would call them a crisis, was I was talking with a friend of mine. She was a Muslim, and I was with two other friends, and our whole like motivation was to be able to convert her and bring her to Christ.
Hmm.
So we were talking and like being friends, which I feel so like bad now sometimes to think, oh my gosh, like was I actually trying to be friends with this person, or was I just trying to kind of like gain points, like it's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
But I would like to think that I really appreciated her as a friend too. But I mean, like if you appreciate someone as a friend, you're also like, I have to save them. Like I have to
Yeah.
bring them. So I was talking with her and we were like putting our ideas out there. And then she asked me like, well, you're saying that like you guys want to go to those nations where they don't know about Christ, and you wanted to introduce them to Christ, and so that they can be saved. And she's like, but what if they never ever hear about Christ? What if they never hear about the gospel? Like, would God still send them to hell? Like, would your God still send them to hell if they never heard? And that question just like shook me because I knew the answer kind of, but I didn't want to believe that. I was like, well, no, like he can't send them to hell. Like I wouldn't. I was like,
Hmm.
why would he send them? But I was like, but if they're sinners, they would have to go to hell. Like that's it. Otherwise Christ would be for nothing, like his sacrifice would be for nothing. So it was a really hard question, but I couldn't get around me saying, yes, it would have to go to hell.
Hmm.
So I said, no, he wouldn't, because he's a good God and he wouldn't do that. Because I was like, I wouldn't send him to hell. And
Just
yeah.
a quick question. So did you
Mhm.
believe, or were you were taught in a conscious, eternal conscious torment, that hell was a real place, probably of
Oh, yeah.
burning fire? Okay.
A
Yeah.
literal place. Yes. Um, and so my friends looked at me, and one of them was a very like, very intense, bold Christian too. And so he just looked at me and he was very upset. He didn't say anything. He was like, I think it's time for us to leave. And so I was like, okay, bye. And on our way back, because they were friends of mine from the missions organization too. So we were all training together. And as we were walking back to our building, then he was just like super upset. And he was like, how dare you say that? Like, that is not true. And like, why would you say that and like give her false hope? I was like, I don't know. Like, I am so sorry, but I just can't believe that God would send all of those people to hell. Like, that can't be.
Hmm.
And I remember like he talked with our leader and he told him like about what happened. And then I thought he was like, I consider him my pastor back then. And so my pastor talked to me and he was like, hey, what happened? I told him, and I was like, can you help me with this? Like, can you help me process this and understand it? And obviously, he was not like a good Christian, if you want to say that, or he didn't really know what he believed either. And so he didn't give me any explanation. He didn't even try to explore it with me or anything. He was just like, know what? Like, I feel like this is a personal thing you have to explore, and I'm just going to give you a book you have to read. And that was Erasing Hell. I don't know if you've read that book.
No.
I can't remember the
Sounds like a good one,
author.
though.
It is. It is a very interesting one. I really don't remember like most of it right now because it was like years ago. But I do remember that as I was reading through the book, I was like, they're not giving me an actual answer either. Like it feels like they just like I don't know, like they play with the words and they don't end up saying anything.
Yeah.
And at the end of the book, I was like, I'm still in the same place. Like are they going to be saved or sent to hell? And I feel like the book mostly focused on the fact that it focused mostly on God's justice and how we don't understand it, and how like our justice system is so different from God's justice. But we just have to trust that he is perfect and that he is good and that whatever he decides is going to be the right thing. So there's no
Hmm.
way to lose. And so it was like, okay. And I feel like I settled for that. I wanted to believe that that was enough. And so I just kind of like put that away and I was like, okay, we don't need to talk about that again. And that was it. Um, and I probably talk about it with a few more persons. I remember talking with some friends of mine in the training too, like another friend. And I was crying. I was like, I just can't understand this. And she was like, Peely, like, you're so borderline. They used to call me Peely. And she was like, you're so borderline to like almost being blasphemous. And so she was like, just be careful with your words. Like,
Mm.
basically telling me, quiet, like, be quiet, don't talk more, because it was probably also stressing her out. It was probably also becoming a problem for her.
Yeah.
And so nobody wanted to dig into that. And I was like, all right, I guess we're just gonna put it away. So that was like my first like shock, but then I just kept going, you know?
It's amazing you're pointing out two things that really stand out to me a lot these days with Christians is, number one, there's this level of mature, like if you're a mature Christian, you will stop questioning God, you will stop blaspheming in that sense, even if it's just a more inquisitive stuff. In an inquisitive sense, you'll basically say like, look, God is God, he is king, he can do whatever he wants. Anybody that questions him is really grossly misrepresenting what we can do to understand God. In other words, your ability to understand, for example, why God allows suffering, or why God causes, he says in the Bible, he causes evil. You know, your ability to even understand that is so diminished because, you know, you're depraved, you're a human. It's like we're an ant compared to God, or even further. And it's like, how dare you put yourself in the spot of judging God?
Yeah.
And the corollary, the other one that kind of goes right alongside with it, or the outcome is that, therefore, you train yourself, as if it's a maturity issue, you train yourself to stop questioning, to just say, this is an issue of pure faith. And the whole idea of saying that doesn't sound right, I need to question this. Being skeptical becomes a sin, and doubting becomes a sin. And being skeptical, obviously from our side of where we're at now, skeptical is a quote unquote virtue. It's a virtue to say that doesn't sound right, and I'm not going to accept it unless I'm sure that this is right. I commend you for not letting them get to you on that. That's awesome, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard, and I definitely put it away for a while, but I mean, I guess once your brain starts like dealing with that kind of stuff, it's just going to keep coming back, you know, and being like, are you sure? Are you sure you don't want to explore this? Like, yeah.
So you mentioned your parents, obviously, you know, with them being Christians and in ministry. Did you feel the openness to talk to them about some of your questions?
No, definitely not. I think I talked with my brother, and it's like kind of like funny because at the time that I talked with him, he had just like gone to India as a missionary too, like maybe like a year before that. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask him. And I talked with him, and he was just like, yeah, dude, like I'm not in a spot right now where I can talk about it. And he was going through his deconversion process.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I didn't know. I had no idea.
How many siblings total?
Just him.
Okay. So he was already on the same path. You just didn't know it, and you weren't kind of working together on this. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Like I didn't know until months later, actually maybe a year later, that he told me that he was deconverting, or he was like, I'm not a Christian anymore. And I was like, what in that?
That's amazing. So you've gone through, really, including yourself, 3 people in this family that have all deconverted, you, your brother, and your husband. That's amazing. I'm honestly jealous. I haven't. I'll tell you more about my
I understand.
my aspirations later, for sure, towards the end of the video. But could you mentioned the first crack there with hell? Were there any other cracks that started to appear, or things that you were being taught that you're like, something's got to give here?
I think from then on, I focused so much on my mission, which was reaching out to the people and just sharing the good news that I had, that I stopped thinking about it until like 2 years after, when I went to India, and I was living there for 6 months. And that was right after my brother told me that he was not a Christian anymore. And I feel like that's what totally triggered me, to go back to those previous questions and like dig more into it, and also kind of like talk with God and kind of like be like, all right, what happened here? You know?
Was your goal to pull him back at all? Like,
Say
what do you
what?
think? Was your goal at all to pull him back into Christianity?
Not so much that, but mostly kind of like ask God to bring my brother back to Christianity, and being like, come on, let's talk about this, and you have to bring him back. But then as I was doing that, I was doing my research to try to understand my brother's perspective and also some of the questions he put out for me that I didn't have an answer for. And so it's like, I don't have an answer right now. Give me some time. And so I started studying on my own. And I started with a case for Christ. And I started with that one. And I was like, yeah, it's doing the same thing again. Like, there is no actual answer. Like, you're just telling me, like, why you don't trust this, but you're not giving me an actual answer.
Hmm.
And I remember even looking at dates and like with my computer trying to look into it. And I was like, nothing of this is being actually helpful and doesn't seem like it's like any answers. But then I decided, well, know what? If this doesn't make sense, if there's no answers, I still got faith. You know, like I'm going to hold on to faith and that's all I need.
Right.
But then I was losing my faith and I was praying so much. I would be worshiping in my room, like, and it was not happening. And I was like, I am just losing my faith. And I was like, come on, Holy Spirit, like it's up to you. That's the gift you gave me. And now it's not happening. But I was not putting two and two together. That is like knowledge versus faith is what was like creating that lack of faith, you know, like I was getting more knowledge. And so I was losing that faith in that sense.
Hmm.
Could
I ask, did you have any sense at all that deconversion was where it was heading? Like for me, what I mean is I was, and maybe I should have anticipated deconversion.
Yeah.
But I was more just questioning with the assumption that somehow the end, you know, when I got to the end of these questions, the end would be my faith would be more strengthened,
stronger.
I'd be a better Christian. I would be able to even help other people who had struggled with the same questions. And there were certainly some dark times when I just was like, I don't know where this is leading, but I can't stop asking these questions. They have to be answered. And I'll go into some of that too in a little bit, but like I didn't anticipate deconversion. There was no sense of I'll end up possibly believing that Jesus isn't God and that Jesus isn't real. Was that part of your thought too, or how did you see that?
Yes, I completely resonate with that. I was in the same spot. I was like, this is being hard right now, and I have so many questions, and I feel like I am losing my faith. But I was like, God knows how much I love him. And I am here for the long run. And I was like, this is just going to make me stronger. And I'm going to be able to witness to others with even a stronger, deeper faith. So I was totally in the same lane there with you.
It's almost like a blind and arrogant confidence. It's like at the end of the day, I know that I have the truth, right? I know God is God. It doesn't, anything you throw against me at the end of the day, and maybe a mixture of I've experienced, I've tasted the goodness of God. I've sensed his spirit. You know, I remember when I deconverted, I spoke to a friend of mine that was just a lovely lady. She's still very much a Christian. But I told her, you know, Catherine, you know, this is what I'm learning. Christianity isn't what you thought it was. You know, do you really understand where it came from? The origins even of Judaism. And her answer was just, it doesn't matter. I have seen the miracles of God. I've prayed and he's answered, and I know it's real. You couldn't say anything to me about the origins of Christianity. I know God is real. I see him every day. And it's like, there's just no, not even like you open the door a crack to say, huh, maybe I'm wrong. Like that is not an option.
Yeah. I see that so much in some of my friends and family, and at some point, like we were saying, that was me too. But yeah, there's a point when just, and it's funny because every time I say like knowledge kind of like beats faith in that sense, it also makes me think of like how many times people would tell me like, knowledge is going to ruin your faith. Like, don't put so much trust in words or books and stuff, like, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, oh man, yeah, they told me so.
So let's go down this path a little bit. What, as you're starting to do this research, talking to people, thinking about stuff, reading stuff, you've touched on the issue of hell and people that haven't heard, where do they go? What, like I'm guessing here that there was sort of a crescendo that this started to build. What other things did you look at and study that started to become issues where, you know, if you were to look at it as pros and cons for whether this is more likely to be true or false of a religion, you know, when did the false column start to get built up, and what did you study?
Well, I mean, so when I came back to the States, after like spending some time in India, then I shared with my small group about the questions that I was having and like all of this. So they were like so kind. They were kind enough to decide to put aside the study that they were doing to start studying just like the origins of the Bible and how it is true. And so we started studying together, looking at certain like a specific like literature and like scrolls and things. Um, and it ended up being like, well, it's still not 100% sure that the Bible is true. And I'm leading my whole life based on this book. Like, that was a big shock for me because it was like, okay, like I'm literally deciding all of my life based on this book that I think it's the word of God, but it's still not like even 100% sure that it's the word of God.
Mm.
So that was a big one for me. And also when I started just looking deeper and like looking at like denominations themselves and like how many different like beliefs there are and stuff. And I was like, there are very like core beliefs in different denominations that if it's so important for them, why it's not that important for us and we're all still gonna go to heaven, you know?
Mhm.
And so I feel like those were very important points for me that I was like, okay, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, God,
Or like not necessarily wrong for me, like just yeah, or like just wrong for me, you know, like it didn't
yeah,
fit for my
like God gives
life.
unity, supposedly gives
Mm,
unity. Jesus prayed for his disciples, for his followers to be one.
yeah.
The Spirit is, ministering, telling us all the same thing, and yet we're all coming up with such divergent answers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the only reason for sure to deconvert, but it's a pretty big, like, blip on the radar. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
something's not right here.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
mentioned the origins of the Bible. Like, was there anything that kind of tipped you off to the need to study that, or like, what seemed wrong in that area to you?
I honestly don't remember right now. I would have to look at my notebook.
Yeah,
Um, but there were certain like scrolls that were like the Bible was based on, and then they didn't fit with one another. I think it was the like the Gospels, like Matthew and all of those, like if I'm right, I can't remember which ones were that just they didn't fit with each other.
yeah.
Yeah, I have everything in my notebook when I need to go back and be like, okay, like if someone asks me a question or something, it's like, okay, let me look into it because I
So it
don't have
sounds
it as fresh.
so it sounds like you were going through some of the discrepancies, like where one book doesn't tells a
Mm-hmm.
different story in some way, and
A different story, yeah.
yeah, and you could, as a Christian, you could kind of find a way to harmonize them, but stepping
Mm-hmm.
back from a skeptical perspective, it doesn't look like it looks like it's two different stories that
Mm-hmm.
maybe someone's trying to bring together, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you go into it all, how there were so many other books, like that there's not four
Oh
gospels,
yeah.
there's like 40 gospels, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we were reading some of that as we were studying together as a small group. But then I feel like for my friends who were Christian, who still had their faith, it was very easy for them to kind of like conceal that with like God's love and trust. And, and for me, it was like, but that's not enough for me right now. I cannot just trust God because I'm not sure if God exists. So I need certainty. And there is no certainty. There is no, like, I remember one night we were praying and they asked something and I was like, I just want to ask you, like, where's one thing from this like belief that it's 100% truth, like you can show me, like, okay, this is true, that you can trust. And I mean the best the best answer I got, that like, yeah, I can understand, I can see it how for some people work, it was what you were saying, like they were like, well, I don't need anything else besides what I've experienced with God, and that's enough for me to stay. And I'm like, okay, well, but that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and you could easily say that about so
Anything,
many
any
other
other religion,
religions.
yeah,
Yeah,
which is
and
why to me it's like I can understand other people being in other religions because it's like, okay, that's what works for them, but that's my personal view of the whole situation.
yeah. Now you obviously came at some point um, to a point of deconversion. Could you tell us, where did this come to a final crossroads?
Hmm.
And could you also maybe tell in that part of your story, what did you anticipate in terms of the reaction from people around you? And was the reaction, from
Hmm.
your husband, from your parents, so forth, was it worse than you thought? Was it not as big a deal? Like, how was that? So I would love to hear that whole story.
Yeah. Well, so when I finally decided like this is it, um, yeah, it was like after the whole like cultish organization, because although I was not part of the organization, I was still very close friends with the leader and his family and some friends from there that were still working for the organization.
Mm.
And it wasn't until the whole thing exploded that my first reaction was like, okay, I'm going to hold on to Christ even stronger now. And now it's the time to not be thinking about questions, but just like holding on to my faith. And it was for like a month or so that I would just be like praying so hardcore, like worshiping so hardcore in my house. Like I would be like deep down, like in my Bible and like just studying. And then that just brought me more questions and like more like, this doesn't feel right. And like all of these things. And so then I feel like it was like a month or two after, probably like 2 months after, that I finally decided, yeah, I guess I'm not a Christian anymore. Like, I just have to say it. And so the first time I said it out loud was to my husband. And I remember we were at a restaurant. And honestly, this is going to sound very judgmental. And I think it was probably judgmental of me back then when I was a Christian to think I always felt like my husband was not as a strong Christian as I was. And I was like, it's going to be easy for him to process this because
Sure.
he is not really that deep as I was. Like, if it would have been the way around, I think it would have been very, very hard. But so I was not expecting like, I was expecting like a lot of understanding from him. And that's exactly what I got when I told him. He was a little like uncomfortable because he's a very social person. I feel like that was a big part of why he was in the church, because he loved the whole community experience and being part of the worship band and all of that. It was also like a musical outlet for him.
Hmm.
And so when I told him and I expressed my feelings, and I was like, every time I see at the sermon, I just feel like it's wrong. And like most of the things they're saying, I don't agree with. And so it's hard for me to be there. And like, it is really like a struggle.
Mm.
And so he understood. And I told him like, he was like, but I really want to go to church and stuff. And he was not ready to say he was not a Christian. And so I told him that I would take the commitment to go to church as long as he needed me to. And so, but I was like, but I'm not going to be like participating on anything else. I'm not going to a small group or anything, but we're going to church. And so we kept going to church for a month, and then he was done. And then like, know what? You're right.
Just 1 month, huh?
Because I feel like he was probably waiting for that. I feel like I was always the one who was pushing us to like get involved in the church and do things and like study the Bible by ourselves and stuff. And once I stopped, and he kind of felt like, okay, know what? Maybe this is not my thing either.
It's amazing. I know what you mean too when you go back to church afterwards. Not that I have. I guess I probably was in church once or twice, maybe if I'm remembering correctly, since deconversion. But I might be misremembering that. But I could imagine if I was in church. To me, it's all mythology. Like it's not like, well, you believe that, I don't. Like this to me is the same as if you're singing, praise Zeus, from whom all blessings flow, or praise Ra, praise any other deity, whether they're a deity that people believe today or that's already kind of died out,
Yeah.
praise Thor. It's like, it's mythology. And it's, to me, it really gets into the sickness of when you're teaching this to kids. It's like, you talked about how you're putting your whole life and all your stock in this one belief system, and to you it was real. It wasn't like a belief system, it was a relationship, but it's like you're putting everything in it. This better be real, because otherwise, in a certain sense, you're kind of wasting your life.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you purposefully take kids into that, you're literally setting them up with with these blinders that you take away their ability to acknowledge this as mythology, as not real, and you make them believe it when it's not, and then you're literally like wasting their life for them before they even get old enough to make a decision. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it is hard to it's hard to stomach that. Can I ask, could we go back to some of your videos? You made some great points, and I'm just looking at some notes here. You talk about the issue of realizing that this religion was teaching you that you have a dirty heart, sinful, that there's nothing good in you, constantly trying to please God, but failing. I believe in some points you talked about the shame issue, and people deal with either the shame of like sexual desires, or just the shame of like you're just, no matter what you're struggling with, like you're bad just because you're bad, because God says you're bad. You've fallen short of His glory. Did that issue, I know you acknowledged it, but did that issue become part of the deconversion question for you? Like, am I really the sinful person that I was told I was?
I don't think that was part of my deconversion, though.
Okay.
Because I always thought, well, I just gotta accept that. Like I really accepted that. I was like, yeah, I'm an awful being. And if it wasn't because of God, there wouldn't be anything good in me. And I was weirdly comfortable with that idea. But it wasn't until I deconverted that totally stood out to me. And I was like, this is such an awful belief. Like, this is not, well, for me. Yeah, no, in general, yes. It's not a good belief to always see yourself as dirty and bad. And like, unless you have this other being for you, like saving you and like making you better, you wouldn't be any good, basically, And it's something that I definitely, when I finally talked with my parents and I told them about my deconversion, I definitely made them very clear that I didn't want them to. I was like, I want to respect that as their religion. And I said, if you want to pray at our house, that is okay. Like, but I don't want you teaching my kid that he has a dirty heart, that he has a black heart or anything, and that he needs to be washed clean or anything, because he's not. And I told them, like, my kid is great. So, and my parents could only agree with that. So they were like, I understand. And I really hope they're going to be able to respect that.
Did, was there a response overall when you let them know that you had deconverted? Was it better than you feared? Was it worse than you feared?
It was definitely better than I feared. That's a good way to put it. I was very nervous when I talked to them because, of course, I mean, they're still both pastors and very deep in the ministry. So I knew what it meant for them too. And I remembered when I was younger and I was struggling with bulimia. I remember when my parents found out, my dad totally told me, like, I'm going to have to leave the ministry. I can't be a pastor anymore. And I felt like the worst in the world, because I was like, I know this is what my dad loves and I'm ruining his life, basically. Because they told me that was like a sin, and they were like, because you are dealing with this, I'm going to have to stop being a minister unless you stop, as if it was something that I could just snap and fix it. So that was a whole different journey. But back to when I told them that I was not a Christian anymore, I thought they were just going to be super upset and disappointed. My dad was like so loving, so kind. And he was like, but the thing is that they already went through the whole deconversion process with my brother. And I feel like they were more prepared to deal with this with me. And so he was very loving, very kind. My mom was also loving, but in her own way that is sometimes hard for me to kind of like translate to my love language. But I get it, and I understand where she comes from because I've been there. And so, yeah.
How does it feel knowing that you've got loved ones, extended family and all that is beyond sure that you're going to burn in hell when your life's over?
Yeah, that was actually my biggest fear, because I knew what they were going to think. I knew what they think that it's going to happen to me or who I am. But I feel like what comforts me in a weird way is to think that they might still rely on the idea that the Bible says that if you believe in God, then you and your house would be saved. You and your household. I'm sorry, I'm translating from Spanish to English.
Yeah, no, you're good.
And so I feel like deep inside them, they think that I might see the light at some point. And so, I feel like that gives them some comfort, and in a weird way, it gives me a comfort that they can have that.
Hmm. So they think somehow it'll work out in the end.
Yeah, they probably don't think that I'm doomed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You we talked a little bit about we've talked a lot about the deconversion process, but I wanted to ask about the actual moment. Like, obviously there's a lot, like we said, there's a lot of seeds that get planted, it builds up, and eventually you kind of admit, maybe you officially deconverted a month earlier or 6 months earlier, and you couldn't say the words. Whatever that experience is like, at some point people admit to themselves, definitively or slowly, I am not a Christian. I have deconverted. I place zero value in the Bible anymore, in Jesus. It's just a book. It's not a good book at that. It's a bad book. And I'm moving on. I'm not switching religions. I've left. I'm not switching teams. I've left the stadium. I'm not playing
Yep.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
With that though, there's a lot of residual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get into some of the long-term residual stuff, but one of the first ones that hits people is when you die, you don't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Do you struggle with that? Just the loss of eternity, or maybe it's more like you're not going to see loved ones again. How did you process that part of it?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. Um, I don't think it was so hard for me, the fact that I didn't have an answer for the afterlife. And I was very open to any ideas. I was like, I don't really care. I don't want to have anything for certain anymore, like in that sense, unless there is something that can prove it, which there's not. So, I mean, and so I remember talking with my brother, and he like threw some ideas there, or like some like, oh, you should check this out, or like he was talking about like what is that? I can't remember, but it's a religion. Oh, deism. And he was like, you should check out deism. And I kind of like checked it out, and I was like, no, what? I don't want to belong to any kind of religion. I don't want to have to hold on to anything. I just want to like recreate myself. And it's been a long, long process, and I've taken it slowly. And I feel like it was really nice to be able to get comfortable with the idea of not knowing, which
Mm.
was not a thing for me before. It was like, I gotta know. And now it's like, know what? I don't know. And that's okay. I don't need to have an answer for you. And like people, like some of my friends would ask me, like Christian friends from back home, they would be like, well, like if it's not Christianity, then what it is? You have the answer? Like, give me the answer. I'm like, no, I don't. And that's the thing. Like, I don't have to have it. Like, I don't have an answer.
Mm.
And that having the ability to be able to just decide that, to say that is, it's been good, but it's been a long, long journey.
Yeah, it's almost like it's just becoming human for the first time. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah,
it's like waking up from a really bad dream or a coma, and you're like, I've been asleep and I didn't know it, and it's
that's
like
right.
you're using your mind for real for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Could I ask, was the Old Testament genocide and slavery and things like that, the tribalism slash racism,
Yeah.
the kidnapping, the misogyny, the genital mutilation, I could go on and on, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of your process of, like, did that come into it at all?
Into my deconversion.
Yeah, like where you're like, it says go in and slaughter everybody. It says go in and kill everybody, even the little babies, the little boys, but you can keep the girls for yourself as long as they're virgins. Did that stuff, it says clearly you can beat your slaves, and as long as they don't die, you don't get punished. But if you beat them and they die, then you have to pay some shekels or something. But you can give your slaves away to your kids because they're your property. Did that bother you before you deconverted, and did that become part of your story, or was that not a big deal?
So now that you mention it, and actually watching your previous videos, oh my gosh, when I heard you say those things, I was like, yes, yes, exactly. And I remember it would always bother me. I would be like, why would God allow that? And I would ask sometimes, and they would be like, well, that's God of the Old Testament, but then Jesus, like Jesus is so loving and he's so, and I think I didn't like realize, but is the same being, and like he should be loving even in the past. He's not like us, that we learn from our mistakes, that we become better and like evolve. He's not supposed to evolve. He's supposed to always be
Yeah.
fully completely perfect. And so, but I guess I just didn't allow myself to dig into that. It did definitely bother me, and I was not comfortable with that. But I guess I just wanted to trust and be okay with it, even though I was not truly okay with it.
Yeah. I,
Mhm.
I've admitted a couple times in my videos, I was totally okay with it. It did not bother me, and I, again, say that to my shame. But when you put this idea of God as the king, he can call the shots. You cannot question him. When you get that into a kid's mind young enough, and I was certainly one of those kids, you don't
Mhm.
question it. You just
Mhm.
don't.
And I'll tell you that, and also it bothered me a lot, the whole like the Jewish people being so important and highlighted. Even because it's a big deal in Guatemala, like the country I come from, it's a big deal to, if you're a Christian, to like lift up the Jewish people. And some of them still think of them as like the chosen ones, and like, you know,
Yeah.
and it really always bothered me because I was like, but why? Aren't we all supposed to be the same? Like, I was never okay with favoritism. So I was like, this is not okay. And if anyone's gonna be the favorite, that's gonna be me. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't say that.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. That was one of the biggest issues for me, and
Mm.
one of the first seeds that I recall for my deconversion was an older gentleman that I love dearly. He and his wife are just salt of the earth kind of people. They rescue greyhounds, and uh, I was at a greyhound rescue event with them that they did, and we got a chance to chat. And I said, just curious where you are with God, and because he went to church, I knew some kind of liberal church, and he's like,
Mm.
well, let me ask you, does it make sense that if God really is all, he's got so much loving kindness,
Mhm.
and he really really wants you to know his nature, he's desperate for this fellowship with his people,
Mhm.
does it really make sense that he would speak to just one little tribe? You
Mhm.
look at it and it's like the size of, compared to an envelope, of the world, it's like it's a little postage stamp, or smaller. It's like, does it really make sense that God would speak to this little tribe and
Mhm.
not speak to anyone else? And then you look at other groups at that time that were more advanced, some of them in Asia, they already
Yeah.
had writing, they had books, they had more advanced math people. It's like he doesn't go to them, but he goes to this group. And at the time, of course, I had answers. I was like, no, well, the Bible says God picks people, he elects. That's part of his beauty, is he elects who he wants. But
Mhm.
looking back, it's like it's a version of tribalism, and you know
Yeah.
I guess racism, if that might not be the right word, but it's definitely tribalism. Like, it's us versus you. God chose us. He did.
Segregation in a way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're in the club and you're not. And
Yeah.
even in Romans, I went into a deep dive in Romans 9, where Paul defends election, and it reminds us that in the Old Testament it says, Jacob have I loved and Esau have I hated. And it's like he chooses to hate people. And there's verses that literally say, like, what is the value of someone that is not chosen? Like, what is the reason for their existing if God isn't going to choose them to be in this
Mhm.
club?
Mhm.
And it says those people are still going to give him glory by being fuel for the fire. And you look back and you think, what the hell did I believe? This is
Mhm.
insanity. Anyway, I'm
No, 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 you're good.
I'm giving
Yeah.
my soapbox here.
No,
Um,
you're good.
you know what I'm saying?
I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah, like I've been there too, and looking at the things, like looking at the Bible scriptures, and it's like, why would I read this and be like, oh, like this is okay, like God is so loving, like, oh, it's really hard to go back and like look at that.
Did you get sidetracked at all in your deconversion process, or did you reflect on the idea of the blood issue? Like, why does God have to have
Mm,
blood? Like, why
yes.
can't he just say, I just forgive you?
Yes. Uh-huh. No, I totally thought about that. I totally thought about that. But I would think, no, that's too like silly of a thought. I don't know why I would think that. I was like, well, there's an answer, but it sounded to me sometimes like this is so wrong, because I mean, growing up in Guatemala, we learn about a lot about the Mayan people. And so it's basically the same thing, like they would do a lot of blood sacrifices, and like they would need this person to redeem the people. And I would be like, that sounds a lot like Jesus. But then I would be like, no, but I don't want to compare one with the other, because apparently Mayans were possessed by demons. Like,
Hmm.
how come? But I totally thought that like Mayans were possessed by demons. And I was like, instead, Jesus, like he's been the Lamb of God. So it's definitely something that I now think how could I like reconcile that? Like, I don't know how I did it. Somehow
Yeah.
I did it.
It's amazing to me. I was just speaking to somebody the other day, a different interview, which you can listen to if you want to. It'll be up in a few days. But we're talking about the idea that when you're in it, it all seems so incredibly beautiful in a certain
Mhm.
sense. At least it's like just the beauty of redemption. You were in this, the slavery to sin. You were headed to an eternity
Yes.
of separation from God, but God pulled you out of the slave market to sin. He redeemed you with His blood. He makes you His own child.
Mhm.
You were kind of no parent, but He adopts you.
Mhm.
Just so and He says, I'm going to put my mark upon you. I'm going to make sure that what I started in you, I'm going to bring to completion. You will
Yeah.
be in glory. And it's like this beautiful picture.
Mhm.
And if you were to have told me when I was in it, it's a death cult focused on blood magic
Mhm.
and human sacrifice and scapegoating, I would have said, you're grossly misrepresenting what this is
Yeah.
about. But
Yeah.
now, once you're out, you're like, you know what? It was blood magic. It
Yeah.
was a death cult about human sacrifice. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot more than that, but in a bad sense. But like just in a high level summary sense, it's a death cult of blood magic,
Mhm. Yeah.
scapegoating, and it's like that's
It Yeah, I feel like we are kind of programmed to romanticize the Bible. And so whatever it's in it, it's going to have a beautiful ending. And so we're like, oh, it's good. Like it's fine if right now sounds terrible in like a horror movie because the end is going to be beautiful, like you were saying. It's like the sunrise. Um, and it was funny because as I was reading the Quran, I remember like reading through it and I'd be like, this is so similar to the Bible. But I would be like, but they're wrong. Like, but this is just bad. Instead, us, we have this good, loving, intimate, personal God, and they don't.
yeah,
And now that I look back, is like it's pretty much the same thing. Like we
yeah,
just have some different words and like some like different like change of the story, but pretty much the same.
yeah. Now, did you? I have a couple more questions here, but just off the cuff from my mind, did you get into the pagan parallels issue at all when you were deconverting? The whole issue of
The
a
pig and
lot of this
peril.
pagan parallels, like this stuff came, like for example, the
Mhm.
blood sacrifice and circumcision. It came for sure from the Egyptians and probably some people before them, but there were other groups doing the same thing, and they just kind of pulled it in and kind of synthesized it into their religion. But they were doing blood magic, human sacrifice and animal sacrifice in Egypt. They were doing circumcision in Egypt. There were other groups already doing Sabbath day
Mhm.
worship, or I'm sorry, Sabbath day rest, and they were just kind of merging these concepts and bringing them into other groups later on that were talking much more clearly about the afterlife and heaven and hell. That it's not just about your life now and worshiping God now, but it's about you personally are going to end up somewhere when you die, and there's going to be a purification, a purging, and you need to be holy,
Mm.
in God, or you're going to go to you're going to get burned. Just did you feel like that was part of your story, like studying where did this stuff come from?
I don't think I came across that. No. But
Okay,
it does sounds like something that it would make a lot of sense to me now. And like it could totally be something that it could have been a big discrepancy for me back in the day, but I didn't came across that.
yeah, I feel like that for me was probably the biggest reason I deconverted, and I endlessly feel like it's not in an unfairness sense, perhaps, but just it's like
Mhm.
if someone had really told me where this stuff came from, it would have spurred all the other conversations a lot sooner. Like if someone said almost anything, like someone said, do you know there's not 4 gospels, there's like 40 gospels? Do you know there's not a book of Acts, there's like 6 of them? Does anyone know that, the Bible that you have, it's quoting from the book of Enoch, between 50 and 100 times. I'm still trying to add it all up, but it's counting it. It's quoting the book of Enoch at least 50 times in the New Testament alone. Like, okay, so what's the book of Enoch about? And, what's the ascension of Isaiah about? With all the angelology and, is Jesus an angel? Was he crucified up in the heavens by the archons? Because I mean, it's if that's not a concept you've heard before, that's part of it. But there's a lot of evidence that Jesus may have originated as a story of people who believed in having visions, and that Jesus
Mhm.
was crucified by demons up in space.
Oh wow.
And that's from, you look at the book of Enoch and the Ascension of Isaiah,
Mhm.
and it's right there. You're like, well, that's apocryphal or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but they're quoting those books over and over, dozens and dozens of times. So the New Testament writers knew it, and that stuff just, I feel like the Christian, like I went to Bible college, I know there had to be some of those professors that knew this stuff. Never
Yes.
said a word. Never said a word.
I wonder the same thing sometimes because I know people that like they deeply study the Bible and like theology, and I wonder, haven't they encountered these discrepancies? Haven't they come like to this point, and like what happens there?
Yeah.
But like I understand what like your stand is different to mine as we talked before, but to me, I kind of like realized that some people find comfort in that. And from my point of view, I feel that as long as you are not converting other people, as long as you're not trying to impose these beliefs on other people, then that's all right. If that's something that is comforting you and making you a better person, if it's truly making you a better person, then why not? You know, like if some people want to practice yoga, some wants to be Buddhist, some wants to, I don't know, work out, hike, whatever, like whatever makes you a happier, more loving person is something good. But if
Yeah.
it's making you judge other people, to be in constant, like, be constantly anxious about like what's going to happen if God is loving you, if you're being enough, then probably there is something to dig into and look deeper, you know?
Yeah.
But I can see how for some people it can be comforting and they don't want to look deeper into it.
And that's a good segue to a question I was going to ask. In one of your videos, you mentioned this. You said you can be intellectually ready to let go of religious ideas, but
Hmm.
still not emotionally ready to let
Yeah.
go. What does
Hmm.
that look like to somebody they're like, yeah, I see the discrepancies, but I'm not ready to take the path you took. Have you seen people that are like that?
Yes. Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. I have a lot of I'm sorry. I have a lot of friends, and I mean a lot of my friends who were part of the same missions organization that we were studying together and like learning. Um some of them are still Christian, some of them are not, and we all are very close, and I feel like we all have got to like experience each other's like point of view on like Christian beliefs now.
Hmm.
And a lot of them, I know they have the knowledge already to be able to dig deeper and ask more questions, but they're choosing not to. Some of them have clearly told me, I just don't want to look more into that. And I respect that. I don't want to bring someone uh, to like, I don't want someone to go faster in their journey, you know,
Yeah.
because I feel like we all have a journey and we all have a pace, and it can be sometimes too painful if you go too fast. Like if someone is pushing you and you're not ready for that growth, because sometimes it requires more experiences, it requires more support to be able to take that step. Because
Yeah.
maybe I had a lot of support technically because a lot of my friends had deconverted too, and some of them did it before. Like I had my brother too. And I feel like that helped me a lot during the process. And it was still a very painful, long process that is still I'm still in a process.
Hmm.
There's still sometimes there's some triggers that it's not that I am going back, but there's some triggers that made me question, did I do the right thing by stepping back? And like, should I just go back? Should I just go back to Christianity, you know?
Hmm.
And then and then it's like giving my brain some time to process things and realize I just can't. Even if I wanted to, I just can't. Like for ethical reasons, I just can't go back.
Yeah.
But I can totally see how someone that is able to kind of like hide that and just put away those questions and not dig deeper would prefer to stay there. Like, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't judge them for it. Like, it's hard.
Now, do you find any kind of residual parts of your time in Christianity coming up? Like, I think in one of your videos you mentioned like a worship song pop into your head, or maybe you'll hear it. And I've occasionally had that. I think especially like about Christmas time, like I'll hear a Christmas song in the in the store, or I'll think ahead to what kind of Christmas songs I used to sing as a kid, and now
Mhm.
they obviously are not a part of my life anymore.
Yeah.
Do you ever have things that just pull you back, and in a sense of like not a bad sense, but just like it's just like maybe a fond memory, or just something that's like such a habit?
Hmm.
Do you ever find yourself doing that, or do you, I guess in a related sense, do you ever find yourself tempted on any level to, I don't want to say the word pray, but just like, do you find yourself thinking about like, even like just colloquially saying, oh God, I hope this works out. Like, do you ever
Mhm.
find yourself just anything of that old life kind of still have its tentacles in you that you just have a tough time getting fully rid of?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I feel like something that had really helped me is the fact that I I give myself a lot of grace now. Which is the thing that I didn't do before at all. And now I just
That's
give
ironic,
myself
isn't it?
it is. Yes. It's so ironic. And like I am so able now to love other people openly and freely without double like thinking about it like or how to love this person. How is the right way to love this person? There's no right way. Just love people, you know? But that's something that I couldn't do before. I was like, well, if this person invites me to their wedding, but I don't agree with the partnership they're going into, should I go or not? What's the best way to love them, you know? And I
Yeah.
was like, heck, whatever. Like, I love you. Like, love however you want, you know? And I feel like that same grace that I give to people, I am learning to give it to myself too. And it's like, if I right now feel like I want to listen to a worship song for a reason, I'll listen to it. You know, I haven't really because I feel like now it mostly like triggers me in a bad way.
Yeah.
So I don't do it. But if I wanted to, I would do it as long as I am not judging or hurting other people. I don't see a reason why I shouldn't allow myself to enjoy something, you know?
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. It's amazing. I love how you put that. It's like now that you have exited a religion that is supposedly
Hmm.
founded on the concept of grace, now that have deconverted, exited, you've left the building, now you've got more grace than you've ever had before. And I would add for myself, and this may be true for you too, I feel like I've got more peace. I've had more
Hmm.
peace
Oh, yeah.
than ever before.
Well, it's funny because in my family and friends would know this that lately, after I left, um I had three big like, and I'm very open. I'm sorry if this is too much. Just tell me like this is too much information. I'm a very open person, but I had three like I would almost call them mental crisis or like anxiety like attacks or something. The first one was actually one time that I was just realizing I gave so much of my time to Jesus, and he just turned
Yes.
away from me. Like but and then like I remember falling on my living room on my knees and I was crying. My husband was there and I was like, why? I was like, I loved him so much. Like I would like wanted to serve him till the end. Like I was willing to do anything for him. Like I technically based my marriage, my whole life around him and what would please him. And so I was like so frustrated and disappointed. The next day, I was feeling, and like I was telling you, I'm trying to be very graceful with myself. And I was feeling like I wanted to go to church, but I didn't really. So we ended up going to this like Universalist church. And it was just comforting for me to be in that community and just follow the like rituals and stuff. It was for me like very comforting. We never went back. But for that day, it was something good, you know?
Yeah.
And so I I think like my friends and family know most of them know that I've been like having those episodes, but I see it as something good. Although it's hurtful and it's very intense in the moment, it has helped me discover some triggers, some things are that I need to like change and dig deeper and heal. I've been going through a process of healing and like it's part of my journey, you know, which is why I was telling you I understand why some people would rather not get out of it because
Yeah.
it is painful. And mostly for like people that are very emotional, I think that we're very much invested like emotionally into things. It can be very, very hurtful.
Yeah. And I agree with how we talked about people needed to do things in their own timing. I've heard of people that get very depressed when they leave
Hmm.
Christianity, and it makes sense. I feel like I must have done some of the grieving in
Hmm.
the 12 to 18 months before I left,
Hmm.
because it didn't hurt too much. I think for me, I know other people would not say this was their experience, but for me, it was like once I realized this wasn't real, that this God had never existed, and
Hmm.
that this as you said, the love of our life, the person that meant the most to us, he's never been real for a millisecond of this whole thing. to realize that I escaped it. And I
Yeah.
hopefully, if I, lived, hopefully a couple more decades, I've got some time left in my life to make it count for something real,
Yes.
and to leave this planet better.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully even undo. I've said if I brought 100 people into the kingdom, I'm going to take 10,000 back out. Like, I want people to escape this, and I can make a difference. And I love. I guess I was just so impressed, not with myself, but just with the experience of, like, I escaped. Most people that
Mm-hmm.
I know of don't. I mean, I know there's people that probably say, "Oh no, I know a bunch of people that left." I personally did not know anybody that
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware of. And
Yeah.
well, I knew one person. I should say, there was one girl that I knew, and she's actually in one of my interviews if you want to go back. But a friend of mine, she and I grew up in kindergarten, and she had deconverted like 15 years before I did, and we had a little bit of email contact. And at the
Yeah.
time, I was like, I don't know what to say to you. I mean, because as a Christian, of course, you want to say, there's no life outside of Christ. So anything you're
Yeah.
doing is pretty much cuckoo bananas. You got to figure out a way to get back to Christ. That's reality. Jesus is
Yeah.
real. And we were fortunately able to touch base, 10 years later or so when I deconverted. But apart from her, like, most people in my world were Christians, and they were, ultra Christians. It was like, your goal is not to question the Bible. And it's like, your goal is just to get deeper in your love relationship with Christ. And to
Mm-hmm.
think of all these people that I respected, and even like scholars, like, C.S.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis, who's
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
to
of
think,
course.
as brilliant as C.S. Lewis was, he got sucked in and trapped. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not more brilliant than him, obviously. I'm nowhere near as brilliant as someone
I
like that.
know.
But it's like,
Yeah.
but I still found a way to escape. Like, I'm so glad. And
I
it
know.
helped me get through a lot of the layers of depression so quickly.
Mm-hmm. You feel like you left the matrix and you were like, oh,
Yeah, like,
go
this
back and
is,
check on the others. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. And I feel like maybe at some point I thought, should I be kind of like trying to like, and I feel like that's how I got into starting making my videos. Um, but I feel like I see it more from the perspective of whoever is ready, I want to be a path in a way that they can feel comfortable and like they can feel like there's a safe space and someone
yes,
who has been through that too. Um, I feel like after being a missionary and being so deep into like rescuing people type of thing, I feel like I am done with that lifestyle in that sense. I'm like, all right, let me hang the cape. I'm done with that, and I'm just like here if someone comes like that's awesome. I'm here for them. So
yeah.
I feel like that's my view, but I can totally understand like where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to wrap up by focusing on a subject that's very, very near and dear to my heart. Childhood indoctrination,
Mm-hmm.
the psychological abuse of Christianity. I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
start with a few quick bullet points, and just have you just say whatever comes to mind about these. Lying about the nature of reality, implying that genocide, land theft, slavery, misogyny, kidnapping are okay with God and should be okay with us if he commands it. Teaching them that blood magic is real and necessary. Teaching kids that they are broken and sinful and need to be fixed. Sending mixed messages that God loves you. He has incredible loving kindness for you, but he will curse you if you walk away from him, and he will ultimately burn you in hell. Teaching kids not to question authorities and elders, or to question the narrative and the party line. Using fear to control others, requiring people to give up everything for mythology. Purity culture, shame culture, guilt culture. Teaching kids to put blinders on. Teaching them to be satisfied with not knowing and understanding the world. Giving them a self-image based on this mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching them that things that are clearly wrong, that we should think are wrong, are actually normal and good in that worldview. Teaching them tribalism, that we alone are right and everyone else is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Scaring kids into future punishment. Having no real boundaries, that we, God gets to control you, even your thought life. Forcing them to accept narcissism. People who are covertly narcissistic do so by being critical and judgmental, which is just absolutely neck deep in the character of God in the Bible. And then overtly narcissistic by acting like tyrants, which is, again, part and parcel of God's character. Creating the anxiety that you talked about, creating emotionally immature adults where you can't live without this pretend mythology, as your crutch.
Yeah.
Stealing people's autonomy, setting them up for trauma, shunning and devastation if they deconvert, teaching women to submit to men, even men who are very bad, teaching women that they're not as valuable to God, and that God, when he speaks, pretty much speaks to the men. Teaching them to make important decisions, such as romantic and marriage decisions based on the will of a non-existent deity. Giving certain people lifelong emotional and spiritual power over you. Creating a worldview based on taboos, don't do this or God's going to get you. Having an anti-science bias, inhibiting critical thinking skills, fearing an apocalypse, teaching people to live by tradition and faith, not by the truth or reality. Discouraging rationality, instead surrendering to ancient texts that teach horrible things. Acknowledging that a child's brain is like a sponge so that they soak up truth and wisdom, or they can also soak up nonsense, and choosing to let them soak up nonsense. And then ultimately, for a lot of people, creating unhealthiness, dysfunctions, depression, disorders. The list could go on and on and on. And I will be making a lot of videos about it. That's about 20 or so bullets. It's a lot, and I'm sure you could add a bunch more that I haven't thought of yet. But what does childhood indoctrination mean to you? And is this psychological abuse?
I mean,
Loaded question.
It is a loaded question. So because I have close friends of mine that I see the way they're raising their kids, they are Christian, or they're so there are different kinds of Christian, and there's some kinds of Christian that maybe back in the day when I was a Christian, I would say like, oh, they're lukewarm Christian, like they're not so into it, like they need to get closer and whatever. They don't live by the rules, basically, they kind of create their own rules. But now that I can see it from afar, I'm like, I'm so glad that there are some lukewarm Christians.
Yes.
Or yes.
Or liberal Christians.
Yeah. But because I've seen some of my friends that have kids that are my kids' age, and the way they're raising them is pretty much the same way that I'm raising Rio, like based on love and kindness. And I feel like a lot of them don't focus so much on the God of the Old Testament, it is funny too when you're like, okay, let's look at theology and how this life should be lived, like based on this book. It's like, no, like it's the same God, like you're still teaching them that God was okay with that. But because I see my friends are not teaching them that, they're not telling them like genocide was good, or like you are bad, or things like that, or like women don't have a say, or things like that. They're actually empowering their little girls. They're telling them to love people from different genders, and like to love all kinds of people, And because I've seen that, I can say I definitely don't agree with indoctrination. I would never agree with indoctrination, but that doesn't mean that I would disagree with people raising their kids Christian in the meaning, like in the way that my friends are doing it. Like most of the people from my previous recent church were actually very open people, very loving and kind, and it's a new different world. It's a new different kind of Christianity that it's more open. And I know that to traditional Christians, that is a bad thing.
Right.
But I see it as a really good thing. I see it as something beautiful, because then they're just raising the kids on their certain liturgies. How do you say that?
Liturgy.
Yeah.
Liturgy.
But that doesn't necessarily put them in indoctrination, that they're still giving them the freedom to choose something different if they want to later. And that is beautiful. I think like as long as they're letting their kids know, but you have a right to choose and you can choose differently, and I'm still going to love you. I feel like that is it. As long as they have a way to escape if they need to,
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It reminds me a lot of like if you go to a cafeteria where there's maybe if you're in school and there's a bunch of different people working behind the lunch workers, and they kind of point out, do you want baked beans or do you want macaroni and cheese? You kind of pick and choose what you want on your little plate. It's like, I'll take the New Testament, I'll take this. And to me, it doesn't make sense. Like if it's mythology, don't take any of it. But it's like if you feel like you have to have mythology in your life, then pick the good parts, which a lot of them, like you're saying, they're doing. They're picking Jesus's love.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what's hard about it is, to me, is just like you said, if Jesus is God,
Yeah.
then you could basically you could take the Old Testament things, like
Yeah.
you could say God commands genocide and replace it with, you know, if you want to use his name, Yahweh. Yahweh says go kill everybody, but keep little girls for yourself. If you were to switch it and say Jesus, you say Jesus commanded, and so it's like Jesus is that same person. So it's very much a pick and choose, and honestly, it's like an ignoring. Like, okay, I'm not only just going to pick and choose, but the stuff that's left, I'm going to act like it never existed.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that, but I would rather have that than obviously the you know, you're all going to burn in hell if you don't believe, just like I do, kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
do you
Totally.
when you look at your son, and you mentioned just, you know, he's he's awesome, he's beautiful, do you feel like you're a little bit proud of just the fact that you're giving him a shot at reality?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And we talk about it with my husband all the time. I go back and like think about things that I was taught when I was little, and then I look at my son and I'm like, okay, this is good, you know, like he is my hope. He is my hope in that sense, because it's like, okay, I had to deal with all of that. I'm having to work on all of this right now. But he's going to be safe from that. And hopefully then like he's moving a step ahead of that, you know, like I'm helping him. So that is beautiful. Like to me, it's like, okay, whatever, you know, let's just forget about that for a second. I don't fully forget about it, but let's forget about that for a second and focus on the beauty of the now.
Yeah. That's so cool. I love too that it's you're encouraging kids to be explorers, lovers of life, to ask questions and not be afraid. There's a excuse me, there's a YouTube channel I listen to. I've listened to a lot. It's a group called a guy called Theremin Trees, and excuse me, I'll put a link beneath the video for him. But he talks about how when he at one point would ask some questions about God, like you kind of mentioned you did, he was just ripped to shreds. Like, don't blaspheme God, don't ask. And I love that when you create this space, this safety net to say, hey, you think what you want. If you end up being a Christian, you know, for me at least, yeah, it would disappoint me a little bit, but you know what? You're free to ask the questions you want and to explore. And if you feel like life is different than it was for your parents or grandparents, I'm okay with that. I respect you, as opposed to you believe this, you know, you take this one path or that's it. You are awful.
Yes, you're bad if you don't follow this, and you're a disappointment type of thing.
Yeah.
Which I feel like a lot of us, I feel like a lot of us grew up with that, like understanding that parents wouldn't say that, but you kind of get it, that if you leave my beliefs, then I'm not gonna love you as much, or like I'm gonna see you differently. You're definitely not, I'm not gonna be proud. So no one wants to disappoint their parents. But I feel like it's different now with like the younger Christian generation. That's changing. Not everyone, but hopefully a lot.
Yeah,
So.
I suspect a lot of people are probably quietly deconverting. I've even had a lot of people reach out to me, like they're like, I've deconverted. I'm kind of on track with you, but I can't talk yet about it. And we all have to obviously respect, you know, people's timing, but I feel like it's time for this mythology to stop influencing our planet's, you know, political status, our cultural, like this is like mythology is dominating our planet on so many levels. It's like, this is so stupid. Like it's mythology, people. Let's get back to reality. And I feel like my platform is very small, obviously, but I feel like I've got to do something. And the hard part is, like you said, like, no one wants to, you know, upset their family, or you know, no one wants to make people like feel bad about it. But it's like at the same point, I'm like, it's time to get on board. Like it's time to stop doing all the damage. It's time to undo the damage if you can, and it's time to just create a better world for our future, for our kids. And that to me is my passion. I do want to ask if you could, with one final question. There's people that might listen to someone like your stories, your videos, or mine, or something like it, and they say, you know what, I've kind of been thinking that, but I've never really actually articulated those thoughts. You know, you've put some of my thoughts into clear words for me. And I love you're very articulate. I think you should keep doing videos as much as you can.
No,
You're doing an
thank you.
awesome job at them. But
Thank
you know, you're articulating stuff for me, and you're helping me see the other side of this. But maybe they're like, they're struggling with how to move forward. They're like, either I know God is God because I just know, I'm
Yeah.
sure He's God, or maybe they're like, I can't question this. Everything's going to fall apart. Maybe they're even in ministry. Maybe they're a missionary. Like, I can't leave. This is my livelihood. If I leave this, I lose my job.
Yeah.
And whatever reason, they're like, I'm stuck. I feel like I'm in quicksand, and I don't know how to move. And maybe even they're depressed. Like, you know what? I can't even move forward because if I go where I think I'm about to go, it's going to get very dark for a while. For whatever reason. What do you say to somebody like that who's just desperate to move forward but kind of frozen in this?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I could totally understand that. And I feel like sometimes it's not even losing their job as much as it is losing their identity. Because I feel like a lot of us found our identity in it, like in our ministry, in our calling, in like whatever we got to do at church or outside of it. So it is a big deal. Like having to explore that, it's a big, like huge, like hard spot to be in. But it's a good spot too, because this is when you can learn how to give yourself grace, like we were talking about before. And it's like, it's all right. You don't have to say you're not a Christian yet. You don't have to deny Jesus. You don't have to stop praying. You don't have to. All you have to do is allow yourself to explore. You are still a Christian. You are still loved. You still have your friends. You're just allowing yourself to explore. And if your friends are truly your friends, they're going to stick by you, even if you tell them, hey, I have these questions, you know? So thankfully I encountered that. And I want to believe that there is more Christians like that out there that will give you the space and they would still be your friends, even if you don't believe or share their beliefs. And they might not. But if they don't, this world is huge. I promise you are going to find more friends. Like, get into Facebook groups. There are many Facebook groups that actually I noticed we both were in one of the same, like, deconversion Facebook groups.
Yep.
Get in a Facebook group. You'll find a lot of people that share the same experiences or like at least the same thoughts, that you can have a safe space to explore these ideas. And yeah, I feel like grace is a big, big word in and outside of Christianity. Is just the way that you actually apply it. And it's just, okay, whatever space you need, whatever tools you need to use until you get to a point where you're ready to say, I am not, or I still want to stay, you know?
Yeah, good thoughts. We were talking before about worship music, and one of the last worship songs that I really remember, it's not really a pure worship song. It's more just Christians singing songs, not as much about Jesus, but it was this more charismatic lady singing a song called "It's Gonna Be Okay." Do you remember that song?
I don't remember that.
It's very beautiful. And I obviously wouldn't listen to it now for any kind of exhortation for myself, just because I know she's implying it's going to be okay because of Jesus, even though she doesn't say it in the song. But beautiful tune. She's got a beautiful voice. But like that to me is become kind of like an underlying, like, you know how you have like a volcano and you don't always see it, but you kind of like the lava underneath. I feel like that's become for me a bit of a message, like, that I want to project, you know, and this is like, this is going to be hard to think through this, no matter where you land, it's going to be hard, because even if you end up as a Christian, land in Christianity, you might have friends that don't, or family that doesn't. These discussions don't always help people to get to a place where everything goes the way you think it's going to go. But it's like, I feel like I just want to encourage people to, it's going to be okay. Hopefully it won't be that hard for you of a journey, but likelihood is it's going to be hard at times. It's going to be dark at times. It's going to be okay. There is a light. And as much as it seems like there is no way to consider that there's a beautiful life without Jesus, like, I can guarantee you there is. Yeah. It's I know you can't, it's like, to a Christian,
it's
like,
hard even to say
that's nonsense.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but
it's so
there is.
true.
No, I like that. I feel like sometimes we can think, "Oh my gosh, I am gonna live depressed forever if I lose this identity." And it is going to be hard because you're gonna lose your identity, and for a while, you have to accept that you don't know who you are exactly, because you still have to build up yourself, find what your values are, find who you truly want to be.
Mm.
But there is no like actual like stagnation, you would say, in life. Like there is no point where you'll stop and you're just gonna get stuck on one feeling. The feelings are gonna keep coming and going, and you're gonna experience joy again. You're gonna experience laughter. You're gonna experience sadness again. But all of that is part of life, and it's just gonna happen. Either you stay or you leave. You're gonna experience all of those emotions. So why
Yeah,
not giving yourself the chance to explore instead of just wondering what if, like, you know?
yeah, and the peace and the sense of healthiness is, it's overwhelming when you leave. It's
Hmm.
hard to even describe it, but I feel like I had more peace even in the first week after I deconverted than I did in 43 years as a Christian. Just,
That's good.
yeah, it's amazing stuff. Well, again, Maria Gernand, thank you so much. Maria
Thank you,
has,
Tim.
sure, Maria has videos. I'll put the link beneath our video here. Maria has videos. I encourage you to go see them. Maria, you have been articulate in your videos. I've watched them at least 2 times. You're articulate, but also you bring a sensitivity that I think a lot of atheists, like myself and others, they need to bring that part of it into it. There's a lot of people that are very angry about how they were tricked, how they were deceived.
Understandably so. Yeah.
Yeah, very understandably so. But it's like if we're going to reach out to people, we need to keep the lines of communication open. And I think you do an
Hmm.
amazing, fantastic job at keeping that sensitivity there, saying, let's have these conversations, but let's do it in as friendly a way as we possibly can, while still drawing some clear lines. And
Hmm.
I appreciate your voice in this, and it's been awesome to
Thank
see
you.
what you're doing. And I look forward to hearing the next few videos, how they come out, and please
Thank you.
keep speaking to people. Your voice is necessary in this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, Tim.
Thank you. Bye bye.